What's up guys, welcome back to the channel, and right now the NBA playoffs are in full swing, and I am fully invested in watching every playoff game. And if you've been watching closely like me, you've seen a lot of young, bright stars finally emerge on the biggest stage. And with that being the case, that got me thinking, who is going to be the best point guard, the best shooting guard, the best small forward, the best power forward, and the best center for the 2020s decade? So today that's what I'll be doing. I'm going to give you guys my predictions for the best player at every position for the 2020s decade. So first up, we'll look at the point guard position. And right now in the NBA, the point guard is probably the deepest position in the entire NBA. And you have a lot of great young players like Trae Young, John Morant, LaMelo Ball. But the best young point guard, and the player I believe will be the best point guard of the 2020s, is of course Luka Doncic. And Luka right now is in his third year, and he's already shown signs he's been one of the greatest players of all time. As in his sophomore year, at only 20 years old, he averaged 29, 9, and 9. Simply unheard of for a player that young. And this year in 2021 in the playoffs, he was once again fantastic, averaging 35.7 points per game that led the playoffs, 10.3 assists, 7.9 boards on 49, 40, and 52 splits. And if you watch Mavericks games closely, Luka on the offensive end is virtually unstoppable. He's a great and willing passer, he can make all the reads, and the defense is so focused on him scoring, they forget he can also shred them with his great passes. And when talking about Luka's scoring ability, he can get to the rim at will, he can run the pick and roll, and his step back jumper is up there with the best players in the league. The only real flaw I see in Luka's offensive game has got to be his free throw shooting, which has to improve. As this year in the playoffs, he shot a pathetic 53% from the line. Now again, Luka is only 21 years old, and he has a long time to improve. And I think in the 2020s decade, he'll be a multiple-time MVP and hopefully an NBA champion with the Dallas Mavericks. So taking into account Luka's transcendent offensive game, how he's so good so early, I think it's pretty obvious he's going to be the best point guard of the 2020s decade. Now looking ahead to the shooting guard position, this is a pretty difficult choice, as there's two guys in my mind that really stick out, that being Devin Booker and Donovan Mitchell. And I think throughout the decade, those two guys are going to be tremendously transcendent players. But if I had to choose one of those guys, I would lean with Devin Booker. And Booker right now is in his 6th year, and he's only 24 years old, the same age as one Donovan Mitchell. But I get the feeling Booker right now is not nearly as close to his peak as Donovan Mitchell is. And there's not really any stats or data to back that up. I just think Devin Booker, his ceiling is a little bit higher than Donovan Mitchell, specifically on the offensive end. As already, he has that Kobe-like game with the footwork, the pivots, and just the overall shot-making ability. It's a very, very rare skill. And the one part I love from Devin Booker this year is that he took a step back offensively. His stats actually went down, but he got better as an all-around player. And when it came to the playoffs, you definitely saw it in the first round versus the LA Lakers. As in his first ever playoff series versus the defending champions, he averaged 29.7 points per game, 6.2 boards, 5.0 assists on 48, 42, and 93 splits. And in the closeout game of that series in LA, he had 47 points on 68% shooting. And he was by far the Suns' best player throughout the entire series. And I think seeing Booker in the playoffs for the first time, it validated a lot of things I felt before, but I couldn't say because he'd never been on that stage. So taking all that into account, I think Booker has the highest ceiling out of any shooting guard for the 2020s, and I think he'll be the best overall shooting guard for that decade. Now looking ahead, we have this small forward, where once again, pretty clear cut, as the player I think will be the best small forward this decade is Jason Tatum. And in Tatum's short career, he's played 4 years with the Boston Celtics. And one thing throughout this time has been fairly consistent is that every year he gets better in some aspect. And looking at the jump he made from 2019 to 2020 and now to 2021, he's a bona fide superstar, and he can be the best player on the floor any single night versus any player in the league. We saw him versus Brooklyn this year, go head to head versus Kevin Durant, a top 15 player of all time, and you could argue the best player in the league. As in this series, Tatum averaged 30.6 points per game, 5.8 boards, 4.5 assists on 42, 38, and 91 splits. And in the last 3 games of the series, Tatum had 50 points, 40 points, and 32, proving once again he's one of the brightest stars in the NBA. And we're looking at Tatum's offensive game. He's becoming a much better willing passer, he's still an elite scorer, and his sidestep 3 has been one of the best go-to moves for any player in the NBA. And the only way I see Tatum not being the best small forward this decade is if some unknown player comes in the league and simply becomes better than Tatum. The one guy I would watch out for is Imani Bates, who I think is coming out in the draft this year or next year, and he's already being compared to Kevin Durant. So in that respect, it is unknown, but I think Tatum has a significant jump on Imani, and if he continues at this pace, he's made a perennial All-Star and possibly an MVP of the league. So that is why I say Tatum will be the best small forward of a 2020s decade. Now looking ahead, we have the power forward position, and this one right here was a very difficult choice, as there's two guys in my mind who really stuck out, that being Zion and Giannis. And I was very, very tempted in choosing Zion, but I think Giannis, despite his flaws, it's going to be very hard for Zion to reach that level of play on both ends of the floor. Now when talking about Giannis, I think NBA fans, they've gotten bored with how dominant he's been. I mean, look at the past 4 years for Giannis. Essentially, he's been a 27, 10, and 5 guy all 4 of those years, a dominant offensive player, and a dominant defensive player, and a multi-time MVP. And I think only being 26 years old, that gives Giannis a solid 5 to 7 years of being a dominant peak Giannis. And even in the later 2020s, if he's not in his prime, he'll still be a top 10 player in the league, given his overall athletic ability and his overall dominance. And the one flaw with Giannis that will always be there is his shooting ability and his late game play. We've seen in the 2021 playoffs, he's not the best player in the clutch, everyone knew that, and his free throw shooting is definitely a major flaw. But I think picking him over Zion, that is the safe pick, and if I had to bet Zion Williamson, maybe, just maybe, he becomes better than Giannis, but if I was a betting man, I would go with Giannis as the best power forward of a 2020s decade. Now lastly, we have the center position, and right now in the NBA, we've seen a center renaissance with Joel Embiid as well as Nikola Jokic, and both those guys are 26 years old, and they've been fairly dominant in their short careers. But looking at Joel Embiid throughout his history, he's been fairly injury plagued, and he seems to never be healthy when it matters most. So that right there takes off Embiid, and it kind of leaves Jokic by himself. But I still think there is one player, one young center, who will have a tremendous impact on the next decade, and that is Karl Anthony Towns. And I'm going out on a big limb right here and saying that Towns will be the best center of the 2020s. And over the past 2 years in total, he's only played 85 games, compared to his first 3 years, where he played all 82 games each season. And I think after being an All-Star in 2018 as well as 2019, and then being injured the past 2 years, people have forgotten how high the ceiling is for Karl Anthony Towns. And in the coming years, I expect Towns to not be a Minnesota Timberwolf, which I am banking on for his case as being the best center of this decade. And I hope once he gets out of Minnesota, people finally realize how dominant this guy is on offense as well as defense, and how great of an all-around center he is, shooting nearly 40% from 3 while being dominant on the block. So me taking Towns, I'll admit myself, that's a pretty crazy pick, as there's not much data or evidence to back that choice up. It's simply a gut feeling I have that Towns, he has so much pent-up anger from being wasted in Minnesota, he's going to unleash it on the NBA once he finally gets released from that basketball hell. And hopefully when that happens, he can show everyone he'll be the best center of the 2020s. So that right there is my predictions for the best player at every position for the 2020s decade. Let me know what you guys think below. Keep in mind I am predicting, I'm taking into account injuries as well as free agency, as well as team concept and team build when choosing these players. And I think there are certain players you can make pretty compelling arguments they deserve to be on this list, like Donovan Mitchell, like Zion Williamson, or even Nikola Jokic. I think if you choose those guys, you definitely aren't in the wrong, as once again, I am predicting and I am projecting the future of the NBA, which as we know, changes from month to month. So as always, thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you guys next time.